Adoption and expensive. Two words that do not always belong together. There are 120,000 children in the United States that are waiting for a forever family, and adopting through this option is extremely affordable. I'm Marcy Bursack, an adoptive mom of a sibling pair, and also the author of The Forgotten Adoption Option. Twice monthly, I will interview people like adoptive parents and adopted children who have been touched by foster care adoption. My goal is to find more forever families and increase awareness about foster care adoption, because if it were you or me, we would want someone to do this for us. Welcome to the Forgotten Adoption Option podcast. Today, I'm going to interview an adopted child who is now a grown adult. So Hunter, meet the listeners. Listeners, meet Hunter.
Hello, everybody.
I can imagine in person, we'd all be like waving at each other. Hunter and I met through a mutual connection on LinkedIn who is in the tech world, because Hunter and I are both in the tech world. The mutual connection shared a post about my book, The Forgotten Adoption Option, and Hunter commented about how he was adopted and had always wanted to share his story. Now, Hunter, this is going to be a really raw and vulnerable conversation, and I want to thank you in advance for letting us peek into your story and for advocating for thousands of children in our country whose story you're telling. However, for our listeners, please be aware this conversation may not be appropriate for young listeners, so please use your own discretion. All right, Hunter, here we go.
Alrighty.
So, Hunter, you're a grown adult now. How old were you when you were adopted?
I was 11 years old when I was adopted. I was in the fourth grade at the time. I had started school late and stuff, but I was 11 years old and a fourth grader at that point in time. So,
I have an 11-year-old fourth grader myself, so I can totally relate to that. How old were you when you went into foster care?
I was 5 years old when I went into foster care.
So you were in foster care for 6 years.
Correct.
So when it was happening, kind of take us into it. What was it like to be taken into foster care?
So to talk about that specific day, it was pretty terrifying, to be honest with you. I remember that day still very clearly, even though I was 5 at that time. I was staying at my aunt's house, which was my father's sister. We were all staying with her. And I remember a police car showing up along with the caseworker. And they pretty much said, "Hey, you're going with us. You're going to go live somewhere else with some family that you don't know." And I remember locking myself into the bathroom, actually at my aunt's place. And I was probably in there for 30 minutes to an hour and refused to get out. And eventually they convinced me to come out. We went to a car. They took us to some office building. And then they gave us all teddy bears. And then from there, they took us to a home. In this new home that we were in, we weren't there for very long, only a few short summer months, actually. Looking back on it now, the family ran the house as it was like a military family. So they ran it like it was a military.
Which wasn't what you were used to, I take it?
Exactly, yeah. I was not used to that at all. I had no structure in my life whatsoever. So knowing that, we would get into trouble all the time, and they would lock us in our bedrooms at that time just because they didn't know what to do with us. Like, I was a terrible kid. Like, I remember on the way to visits to see my birth parents, biting myself just to blame their children that they're abusing me. Like, it was that kind of behavior that I was showing.
So
and
you were,
I
like, acting out to
right.
make it like your foster parents were hurting you? Is that what you were doing?
Yeah, exactly. Like, at that point in time, I was just miserable. I didn't like being there. I wanted to go back to where I came from, what I was used to, with people that I knew. And so I would act out. I would purposely try to get in trouble. I remember one time killing their son's goldfish by dumping the food for the fish, the whole food into the fish tank, just to get a reaction from them, I guess.
Yeah.
So which looking back now, I can totally see why they didn't keep us there for very long. I look back and often wonder if we were their very first foster children because we were only there for like 2, maybe 3 months. Once we left, they actually gave up their license for fostering children.
So now you're questioning if you were so hard. So let's kind of dive into that a little bit, because
Yeah.
you mentioned how you were kind of met with these strangers, these adults that were trying to kind of intervene, right? They're social workers, police officers. And
Yeah.
do you think that there's just kind of, if you could like rewrite the system, do you think that there would have been a more embracing way that you could have been interacted with new adults that maybe would have made that transition smoother for you?
Yeah, like, it's a great question. I guess being that young, 5, they didn't really take the time to explain to me what was happening.
Hmm.
And so that was kind of a startling thing for me as well. I didn't know exactly what was going on. One thing that I will say that really had a big impact on me that was a lot different. Once we got taken away from that home and put into uh, the other home was a completely 360 experience. Like we felt welcomed. We felt like we belonged there. They showed like they cared for us. What I think really made a difference was that the foster parents really took the time to show that they cared about us and that we were there, or that they were there for us to talk to them and just really show that they cared and loved for us, even though they didn't know us, they didn't know who we were either. I just got a different atmosphere than the first home. And I think that is what really made the difference.
You
So,
keep saying we, or were you there with siblings, or were you one of the
yeah,
foster children?
yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. So it was me along with 2 siblings. So I had a younger sister and a younger brother.
And were you always in foster homes all together as 3 kids together?
So the first foster home, it was just me and my sister. They ended up separating my brother into another foster home. But the second home we moved into, we ended up actually being reunited. And this foster home that we moved into was actually the foster home that ended up adopting us 6 years later. Yeah, we stayed with them pretty much our entire time through the foster care system.
Wow. And do you know why your brother was separated initially? Was there just like, was the family not able to take all 3 of you?
Yeah, they were just unwilling to take 3 children.
That breaks my heart, Hunter. I come from a
Yeah,
family of 4, and I couldn't imagine being separated like that. And so I'm sorry that you got separated.
growing up at that point in time, even though I was pretty young, I grew up pretty fast. And it was always my responsibility when I was living with my birth parents to take care of him, and he wasn't there. And so just having that brother not there at all, it was difficult. And I remember fighting with them all the time about why can't you take my brother? Why can't he be there with us?
Sounds like you
And,
felt a very big sense of responsibility.
yep, I did.
Wow.
And I think a lot of that had to do with me growing up, to be honest with you. I remember him getting in trouble, and I was the one that got blamed for it
Mm.
because I was responsible. There was times where I would get beaten and all kinds of stuff, all kinds of abuse based on what my siblings did. At that point in time, I took it as, oh, it's my responsibility to take care of them. Looking back now, I realize it wasn't my responsibility, but chances are my father, whoever it was, or my mother was just taking their anger out on me because I was around.
Mm. And so the beatings were something that you experienced with your biological family.
Yes.
So it's
Yep.
really, yeah, a really confusing time to have to like process as a young child, like, why am I the one being hit? So I can see why as a child you're taking it one way. As an adult, you can really see the bigger picture.
And looking back now, I see things a lot differently, but yeah, it's definitely different.
Yeah. Aging does that to us. So tell me, like, if you were to think, like, as an adult, if you could talk to yourself when you were going into and when you were in foster care? Because, you know, you have so much more experience now. You see the bigger picture now. Knowing what you know, what do you think you would tell yourself?
Yeah. In the end, I would tell myself that I will have a life that at that point in time would look completely foreign to me. My life now is incredible and I'm happy and I have a family and I have a great support system. But at that point in time in my life, I didn't have any of those things. And if you would tell me that I would have the kind of life that I have now, I'd be like, there's no way. Like, that's not going to be me. With that being said, after being put into foster care, I was diagnosed with PTSD at age 5 because of all the trauma that I experienced. And it took a long time and a lot of work for me to overcome my past and to overcome a lot of those things that I experienced. So my formal life and my formal life and my time in foster care is not my fault at all. That's one thing I would tell myself. It was an experience that I lived through and survived, and I often find myself not telling people much about this part of my life because I often get different reactions, and not everyone reacts the same way, and not everyone acts positively when I tell them about my life, especially when I bring up that I had PTSD at that point in time. I guess there's like a bad vibe about people with PTSD, and people tend to want to stay away from people with PTSD. Not all of them are negative. A lot of people actually will say, "Oh, well, you survived a lot. You're very strong," and they kind of respect me more. But regardless of what other people think about me because of my story and what I experienced, I know who I am, and in the end, everything worked out great in my life. It took time, but everything worked out, and I'm happy now. And I ended up having people come into my life that was very positive and a role model for me, and that really helped me to overcome the challenges that I was facing. And so I think ultimately that would be the biggest thing that I would try to tell myself at that age, just to stay strong and everything will work out eventually.
Which is true, right? But so hard in the moment. I know that
Yeah.
I as the adoptive parent, have gone through similar kind of awkward moments, right? Where like
Yeah.
people maybe don't know how to respond. And I spent a stint of my career in social service working with women who had mental health issues and therefore were homeless. And it's just a gamut. Sometimes people understood it and got behind it, and sometimes people
Right.
maybe didn't know, and then sometimes they were kind of like, why don't they just go help themselves? And so I completely
Yeah.
understand what you're saying. I had the awkward moment as an adoptive parent where someone I had known for a long time, we were talking one day and she said, I just wanted to tell you, my husband and I, we are so inspired by you and your husband. And I was like, oh. And she said, yeah, you're taking care of damaged children. And you would have thought like my mouth hit the floor.
Yeah.
Because, and to me it was, and in retrospect, I'm kind of like, maybe she just didn't know, like at the in that moment earlier in our parenting journeys, maybe she didn't know the words to use, right, to say like, this is so cool that you're helping kids that maybe come from a hard place. Like that would have maybe landed a little different, right?
Right.
So those words, they stick. But I'm so curious, you had mentioned that in telling yourself to kind of stay strong, that the life that you knew versus the life that you have now were so different. Can you give us a little bit of a picture of like the then versus now?
Just looking back, even when I was in foster care, it took me several years of counseling and stuff to overcome my challenges. I was a very angry kid growing up. And I guess part of it had to do with the PTSD, that like it's a survival instinct that I guess a lot of PTSD people have, that they just get angry really fast. That was definitely me. Like there was no gradual anger. You know what I mean? Like I was just mad.
Like you were either hot or not, right? Like there
Right.
wasn't
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I was just there. And I would get violent. I was a violent kid. So I was difficult to handle. But my life now is completely opposite. I'm not, I have control over myself. I don't blame myself for a lot of the things that experienced when as a kid I did. So I'm happy now as well. That's a big part where growing up, it took me a long time to be happy because just everything I experienced, especially through the 6 years of being in foster care, I was just tired of it. Eventually, I got so sick and tired of having court and not hearing that I was going to be adopted. For a long time, my mom's rights was never terminated. We were still having visits with her. I ended up hating her as a person. I wanted nothing to do with her. And so that didn't help my attitude at all either. So that's a whole different story there. But I was an angry kid. I think that's the big thing.
Through a lot. You were like uprooted from what was
Right.
your normal, and you had no choice.
Right. But looking back now, like a lot of my experiences, I see that, wow, like I went through all that, but now as a parent myself, I know I'm very sensitive when it comes to how I treat my kids. And I'm very cautious on how other people treat my kids as well. Like, I'm just very careful on, I don't want to be a bad parent and I don't want them to ever experience the trauma that I went through. And I think ultimately it's made me a better parent because I know what I experienced. I know what abuse felt like. I know that kids can get scared really easily, even if you're not meaning to hurt them in any way. And so I'm just very careful with how I interact with my kids and make sure that they know I care for them and I love them.
Yeah, it sounds like you're aware of it because you know
yeah,
otherwise, and you want to do
right.
it right. So Hunter,
Yeah.
do you remember? So you mentioned you were in one foster home for a short time, and then the family that you lived with for years ended up adopting you. And so I'm guessing that when you moved in with who now is your mom and dad, you did not know they were going to adopt you?
No. So we lived with them for a long time. They just liked us, I guess, which is an interesting story because when we were being transferred to the other home, the first foster home called up the family we were moving to and said, "You're not going to keep these kids for very long. They are terrible. And you're going to hate them." Like, so I found that out later in life, obviously. But yeah, my adopted mom ended up sharing that with us. So we were in foster care with them. And during that whole time, we were still doing visits with my birth mom. My birth dad lost his rights soon after we were moved to the second home. He was so violent that they wouldn't even let my adopted mom, at that time, my foster mom, even be in the same room as him. Like, she never met my birth dad at all because they were too scared of him being violent towards her. During this whole time, they were just a very big support for me, and I ended up wanting to be with them. Like, I knew that was the family that I wanted to be adopted by. And before I was even adopted, they even said, yes, we would adopt you, years before this even happened.
So how did that conversation go? Like, because you're a child that you feel like you're completely on the go, right? Like you don't have a place to call a family and a home, right? That is permanent. So how did that conversation come up with them? And just kind of talk to us, because I know that there are people listening that they might be thinking, oh, I might foster and that might happen to me, or I'd really like to adopt children in foster care. How do you even broach that topic? Like, what was that like for you, Hunter?
So it was very difficult. And after a while, to be honest with you, I just got sick and tired of having this process drag on and on. My birth mom, she would do fine for a while, and then she would like drop off, like she would start being bad. And so the court process just took forever because she was doing good and then she would do bad. And then eventually, after about 5 years of this, they don't care about what I want. At that point in time, she said something that really stuck with me. She said, you can refuse to go visit your mom, right? From that moment on, when
you realized you had choice.
And a couple visits later, my sister started doing it. And then a couple visits later after that, my younger brother started doing it. Granted, he was too young to really even know what was going on. He was just doing it because we were. But my sister and I are close in age. We're like 11 months apart. So she was pretty aware as well of what was happening, and she had the same feelings as me. So we just refused to get out of the car, and they couldn't do anything about it. They couldn't make us go in and visit with my mom. So it wasn't too long after that, on the next court date, they actually terminated visits with her because they saw that it's not doing any good. Like, we're refusing to go see her. We, as in like my siblings, because we just wanted to speak our own minds. I was like 10 at the time, and they refused to let us in there. And so I was actually talking to another foster kid at the time who happened to be a teenager living in the home at that point. And we had a conversation and just talked about how I was tired of it. Like, no one's listening to me. The court system doesn't care about me. And so she ended up just terminating her own rights. And that's how we got adopted.
Wow. You had a voice. Yeah. And you were able to use it. So how then as a child, so you said age 5 to age 11. So in the middle of all that, you're in foster care, and then from age 11 on, you're adopted. So there's a lot there in terms of going to school and your peer groups. How did you even explain to friends that you were in foster care and then adopted?
Yeah, we would bring it up that we're in foster care, but at being that young, I don't know if my friends really even knew what foster care was. Like, even when we were adopted, when I was in 4th grade, they threw us like this big party after we were adopted, and everyone just thought it was fun because we were throwing this big party, and all of us ended up changing like our names completely. So, and they just thought it was cool that I was changing my name. They didn't know why or anything like that. I guess they just didn't understand it, but
I'm glad you got to have a party.
Yeah, it was pretty fun.
So Hunter, I didn't ask you this one in advance to prepare for, but something I'm curious, right? So, because I have, of my 2 children, there are moments that were really hard with us behaviorally as well. And I'm just curious, like, if you were to speak to people that either maybe they're in the middle of fostering some kids that are a little more difficult, or they're afraid to do any of this because they're like, I might get one of those kids, right? Like, what would you tell them to see? Because there's something that your forever family, your adoptive mom and dad, saw in you and your siblings, and they could see that there was potential. So what advice would you give to families that are kind of like, I don't know if I want to do this because that's kind of scary?
I think in the end, as a foster child, they just want to know that they're cared about and loved. And yeah, like my case, that took a long time for me to really trust these people that I was living with, but they had the patience with me to just stick it through. And then eventually they saw that, hey, this kid really cares about this family as well, and he wants to be a part of it. Granted, I was still struggling through some of my difficulties, but they saw right through it and realized and they knew it wasn't my fault. If you experienced a lot of the things that I did, that's going to play a toll on someone's mental health. And they knew it wasn't going to be a quick fix. So they just continued to have patience with me and cared about me and loved me through the whole thing. And it can be a toll. My adoptive family had 2 of their own children as well. And it was a sacrifice for them as well, like their own children. But even their children were very welcoming and caring towards us and treated us as, their own brother or sister. So I would just say to have the heart to just have patience and continue to care and love for these people or these children, because eventually they will turn around, their life will get better, they will improve, and they're going to be eternally grateful for that, for everything that you've done for them.
It's very beautifully said. Hunter, now that you've shared your story with people that you may never meet, which to me feels very vulnerable as someone that's also sharing my own story, how does it feel to you to share your adoption story with listeners?
In the end, I just hope that it encourages people to have a heart to really care and really be open to adopting or doing foster care, even if you're not doing it right now, because you can really have a big impact on someone's life. And I think looking back, my foster mom She did foster care for about 20 years. And we often have conversations about her experience as a foster mom, and she wouldn't change it for the world. She impacted so many children's lives, and there were struggles throughout that whole time, but at the same time, she saw the impact that she had on people's lives. And I just would encourage those that are looking into foster and adopting that to really try it out and just really deep down search in your soul to see if that's something that you're really into, because it can be difficult. But if you are, I just encourage them to give it all they got and stick with it.
Hunter, what I love about being able to have you on my show is that you've lived through it and you're a grown adult able to talk about it. And I just so appreciate you being able to share your story, because there are kids right now that need the kind of family that you found. And so I just want to thank you for being willing to talk about what you went through. As a listener of the Forgotten Adoption Option podcast, you are helping raise awareness about foster care adoption and the 120,000 children who are waiting for a forever family. You can also help raise awareness by leaving a review, subscribing, sharing, talking about, and liking this podcast. If you'd like more information on adopting a child or sibling set through the foster care system, visit my website, ForgottenAdoptionOption.com. There you will find out how to get started, and you can even order a copy of my book, The Forgotten Adoption Option, which will guide you through the entire process, and it is available in paperback, audio, and ebook. I welcome you to reach out with questions, comments, and your own story. I would love to hear if you're signing up for training or where you are in the adoption process. You can connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Just search for Marcy Bursack. Thank you for tuning in, caring, and sharing, because every child deserves a family.